I just don't think some people are getting it. Our oceans usually absorb 70 to 75% of the energy in the atmosphere. Um, More than 90% of the heat energy accumulation in climate systems, especially between 1971 and present day, has been in the ocean. Argo, ARGO, Argo array of buoys, is a system of thousands of buoys that are sampling water temperatures 2,000 meters deep and above, and shallower. They are so uniform and spread out all over the entire world in order to provide a constant stream of information. Because observing the oceans is problematic, even under the most favorable of conditions. Historically, shipboard ocean sampling has left vast expanses in time and space, particularly in the Southern Ocean. Unobserved for long periods of time, certain patches of ocean were. Within the past 15 years, the advent of this global Argo array of profiling floats, it's become possible to sample the upper 2,000 meters of the ocean globally and uniformly in space and in time. The primary goal of Argo was to create a systematic global network of profiling floats that can be integrated with other elements of the global oceanic observing system. The network provides freely available temperature and salinity data for the upper 2,000 meters of the ocean, and like I say, that's global coverage. The data that's available within 24 hours of collection for use in a broad range of applications focuses on this examining climate relevant variabilities on seasonal to decadal timescales, multi-decadal climate changes, improved initialization of coupled ocean atmosphere climate models, and constraining ocean analysis and forecasting systems to the most relevant of data. So Argo's been around 15, 20 years, and what have they determined? They've determined that the oceans are warming more rapidly than expected, and that in the last couple years that increase in temperature has accelerated. Now, if you can't and don't understand the relevance of the temperature of your oceans, then really you have no business. You really do not have any business discussing and arguing climate. How can you argue climate if you don't understand the relevance of what your oceanic temperatures tell you? Oceans absorb most of the energy. So if there's all this energy being created, the oceans are going to tell you. And that's what they're telling us. They're telling us that there's a ton of energy in our global system. The energy we know as heat. And what's generating the heat in the solar system and on Earth is the sun. Without the sun, there would be no heat. You could have the worst carbon dioxide in the world. But with no sun, there would be no heat. It would be cold carbon dioxide. Perhaps even liquid carbon dioxide. So it's baffling that people who talk climate leave this out, never refer to it, unless, of course, they're trying to promote a carbon tax on carbon dioxide emissions. And any scientist will tell you that warm water releases carbon, at least as far as our oceans are concerned, and that cold water absorbs carbon. That is why all the carbon measuring instruments show a decrease in carbon in the winter and an increase in carbon in the summer. It fluctuates with the seasons quite readily, quite predictably, quite steadily, and quite uniformly. So there's no doubt that the winter absorbs carbon and summer releases carbon in our oceans, because all the instruments respond that way. Less carbon when it's cold in winter, more carbon in the summer. That's been happening for decades after decades. So we have this massive system of buoys providing constant stream of data, and they're telling us that the oceans are heating rapidly. Now, what could do that? What could heat your ocean so rapidly, and especially the surface temperature? And if it were, let's say, the sun, then your ground temperatures would absorb a tremendous amount of energy. I mean, it's really quite simple. You can do your own experiment in your own home. Get a giant pot of water, a giant bowl of water, and turn on your blow dryer and blow dry your bowl of water until the water heats up. Or you can put it in the microwave. Which energy source is going to be more efficient in heating the water? And it's hilarious when people try to debunk the sun, and there are articles out there now saying, is the sun creating climate change? Is the sun to blame? I mean, when did these articles about the sun causing climate change start to surface? It's when our channel came into its main stride, when we started getting 60, 70, and 80,000 subscribers, and we were putting out constant data on the energy coming off the sun. And you don't have to be a scientist to get all this. You just have to have a blow dryer and a microwave and a large bowl of water. That's all you need to have. But in case, like, you doubt yourself and you doubt experiment, just look at the ultraviolet index for Australia. Now, our UV indexes went to 15. In the United States, our UV index usually goes to 15. And we can see back in the good old days, UV indexes of 13 and 14 were quite rare. And when we go down to Australia and we see a UV index of 16 and 17, when 11 is extreme, if 11's extreme, what the heck is 17? And where do you think all that energy goes? It's absorbed by everything but anything that is not gas will absorb that radiation. When you put your bowl of water in the microwave and you turn on the microwave, the air in the microwave does not heat up. And that's the same as happening here on Earth. People are measuring ultraviolet B, ultraviolet C, extreme ultraviolet with their home detectors, with their own instruments. So how is it that you can stand there and say the sun isn't heating the earth, when in fact that's where the earth's heat comes from? How can you say the sun isn't heating earth when there's a UV index of 17 anywhere on the planet? What do you think that's going to do? Do you think it's going to cool the planet? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying it just has no effect whatsoever? Is that what you're saying? And when they talk about ice caps, and they talk about ice, what's the main global cooling mechanism? It reflects the sunlight. And it's not just visible sunlight, it's also ultraviolet. And it also other forms of radiation. The sun reflected off of ice. And they say that's one of our cooling mechanisms. And that if you get rid of the ice, then all of a sudden that which was reflected is now absorbed. What a difference from reflecting and deflecting to absorption. That's a complete opposite. And so they talk about that mechanism, the reflection of solar radiation back into the stratosphere. But they'll admit that a mechanism is a real mechanism, and that's important to keep the Earth cool, is to be able to reflect back the sun's energy, but yet the sun's energy can't be heating the Earth. It has no role in heating of the Earth, although they acknowledge that failure to reflect and deflect that radiation will heat the oceans. But now that the oceans are heating, it can't be the sun. It cannot be the sun. So where do you think this extreme ultraviolet that's being measured in people's backyards, where do you think this extreme ultraviolet that's even been reported on by NOAA and the National Atmospheric Association, the National Weather Service, where do you think that energy goes? Do you think it just disappears? Do you think UV index of 17 heats nothing at all? You think that energy is just like cold energy? Or do you think it's hot energy? So anybody who says the sun is not heating the earth is expressing an opinion, even if they call themselves a scientist. But that argument begins to fall apart the minute you see a video of somebody measuring extreme ultraviolet in their own backyard. And when you see an UV index of what? Not 11, not 12, not 13, 14, or 15, not even 16, but 17. Are you kidding me? That's so incredible. That a UV index of 17. And then you wonder why Australia is on fire. And they're saying hundreds of millions of animals have died. What you're seeing in Australia is our future. And Australia could become uninhabitable. And they were talking about that 2 years ago, about Australia becoming uninhabitable. Is it due to carbon dioxide? Really? Is the carbon dioxide that much higher? And so anybody who wrote an article about the sun not affecting the climate, addressing whether or not the sun is affecting our climate, was doing so in response to our channel, because we were the only ones out there blaming the sun for our warming, at least on YouTube. Other scientists have been reporting about our solar system warming for years, especially the Russian scientists. So your oceans are at record warmth, Anybody who says our oceans are cooling, it somehow has been misled by liars, or they're lying themselves. The ocean is not cooling. And when you see the megatons, I mean, we're talking millions of animals have died. And not just 10 million, 50, we're talking hundreds of millions of animals have died. They're estimating billions of birds have died since the turn of the century. Billions. So how does that cooling cause that kind of carnage? The number one killer of human beings, the number one weather phenomenon that kills more human beings than any other weather phenomenon, is heat. So then when we talk about other animals dying, what would be the number one weather phenomenon that kills them? It would be the same. It would be heat. Heat causes pestilence, disease, and famine. Heat causes fish to die in the ocean. Heat causes record evaporation and record storms and record wind speeds. And just because we're heating doesn't mean we can't have cold temperatures. Most of the cold records that you see that people shove in your face and dance up and down and shine lights upon most of that is lower climate, lower latitudes that normally don't get cold. They're not setting cold records in the Arctic. They're setting cold records in Texas and in Arkansas and in Iowa. They're setting cold records in the Sahara Desert. They're setting cold records down low. But still, those cold records, in terms of the number of cold records, is dwarfed by the number of heat records. And we've explained this 1,000 times, if not more, why there's cold records even being broken right now. And as long as we still have ice, we're going to have winters. We're going to have a little bit of snow. But have you noticed, and most people have noticed, especially in the high country, that most of the storms now that bring snow are preceded by rain? Rain, snow, snow, rain, rain, snow, snow, rain. Come on. They're starting to call those storms hybrid storms. So all around us, all around you, is evidence of a heating globe. And what's heating the globe, of course, carbon dioxide doesn't help, but when you have other gases that are 10 times more powerful at containing heat and creating a greenhouse, why are we even talking about carbon dioxide? And why are we ignoring those gases? And it kills me when I hear mainstream climate science people and I hear politicians talk about climate change, and not one of them will say the word methane, and not one of them will talk about solar radiation. That's what a joke climate discussion have become. Don't be the joke.